I smell bullshit.
Let's go!
So, there is a kind of thought experiment, I guess you might say, popular perhaps in like dorm room bull sessions, which takes the form of the question: if you could go back in time and kill one person to change the course of history, who would you kill? So I feel like most people would probably say, like, Hitler. I feel like that's probably a pretty popular answer, probably the most popular answer. But some people might be inclined to say, like, Marx, perhaps. However, I myself might posit that if you were to kill Hegel, you might just get two birds with one stone there. So I finally did it. I finally read Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I knew that I likely would eventually. I knew that my own little amateur philosophical journey would likely lead me here at some point. This is definitely one of the most influential of philosophical works, and I want to say right up front that is in no way, shape, or form a good thing. But I also knew that you kind of have to like prepare yourself because Hegel is notoriously difficult. And now that I've read this book, I can confirm that that is very much so. I want to say this: I have read some crap in my day, but this right here takes the cake. This truly takes the cake in terms of like sheer bullshit. I don't think this can be surpassed. If this has been surpassed, I don't want to even encounter whatever could possibly have surpassed this, because this is truly like the ne plus ultra of bullshit. So I have some notes here. You might have noticed this paper here. This is like the first time that I've ever reviewed a book and actually referred to notes. Usually this is all just kind of off the cuff. I usually just pace up and down my hallway out there for half an hour, kind of just thinking up like a rough outline to kind of go through. But with this, I really needed to write down some stuff. I felt like to adequately review Phenomenology of Spirit. So I did. So I'm going to go through my notes here and explain what sense I was able to parse from this tortured mass of verbiage. But I want to preface before we get into the meat of it that I don't even really consider this to be truly a work of philosophy. This is, more properly speaking, a work of theology. And I might highlight the fact that Hegel's degree, like the degree that he got from like college, was really more it was really effectively more of a degree in theology than it was in philosophy, and that is very palpable when reading this. And so before we like get going into what I was able to extract again from this tortured mass of verbiage, I'd like to read a quote here that I wrote down, which summarizes Hegel's entire philosophy far more succinctly and cogently than I likely will be able to do. This is a quote by the professor Stephen Hicks, and it says, Hegel's philosophy is a partly secularized version of Christian cosmology. The Christian history of the world begins with a creation or projection from God, and the world goes through a grand drama of struggle and conflict before ultimately being reunited with God. Hegel's task was to make this intellectually respectable again after the Enlightenment. For God, he substitutes the absolute, which is an impersonal mind or spirit. And it is the absolute's development that is the history of the world. The absolute develops by alienating part of itself in projecting the world we know. The world develops through a series of struggles and conflicts which are successively resolved in the direction of the absolute's increasingly coming to know itself. History ends when the absolute achieves full self consciousness, that is, when it is fully reunited with itself. So, that little quote there by Stephen Hicks is just, again, kind of an overview, I think, and a very, again, cogent and succinct overview of Hegel's philosophy. But now I'm going to just go through what I was able to, again, extract from this just mountain of borderline inscrutable verbiage. So, first off, what actually is what can we call phenomenology of spirit? I think phenomenology of spirit could be called a Bildungsroman of spirit, of consciousness, if you will. The book is effectively an explication of the development of successively higher stages of consciousness, but of successively higher stages of spirit, the development of spirit, not only of like human spirit, but also of the world spirit. So before we like actually understand what Hegel is saying, it's important to understand what Immanuel Kant said. Because Hegel is really kind of reacting in a way to the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. A lot of this stuff can really be attributed to Kant. That this kind of the downward slide, I would say, kind of starts with Kant. But Kant, in his Critique of Pure Reason, posited that the mind can never know reality in itself. All the mind can ever know is itself. That is to say, we can never know true noumenal reality. All we can know is our own phenomenal reality. Well, for Hegel, then, this is kind of an issue. And Hegel is not the only one that took issue with that. You can see similar criticisms of that position in the works of Nietzsche as well. But again, to Hegel, this is just kind of nonsensical. Like you're asserting that there is a reality, that you know that a reality is out there, but you can't say anything about that reality. That just doesn't really make sense for Hegel. And so what Hegel asserts in Phenomenology of Spirit is that if all the mind can actually know is itself, then mind is reality. Reality is effectively mental. This is, of course, idealism. Specifically, it is German idealism, two words that you never want to hear put together. But anyway, so that's kind of the main like gist. That's the foundation of Hegel's philosophy, is that mind is reality. All of reality is a mind. It's effectively the mind of God, or from the Stephen Hicks quote, the absolute. So as I said, Phenomenology of Spirit is kind of a Bildungsroman of consciousness, of spirit, both human and world as well. And the way that Hegel says that consciousness, spirit develops is through a dialectical process. Of course, we now encounter the famous, or I would say infamous, Hegelian dialectic. So, like, when you, at its most basic level, consciousness is like sense consciousness. It's like just, sense, it's apprehending reality through sense, right? But the way that consciousness develops is through recognizing the kind of antithetical nature of what it is perceiving. So, like Hegel says, when you look at an object, you see something that is here and now. He says it is this, it is here, it is now. And yet, upon further reflection, you realize that words such as this, here, and now are effectively universals. That is to say, this would denote a specific thing, which is only a particular instance of broader thinghood. and here denotes a location, but again, any location is only a specific instance of all locations, all of like space, right? And now denotes a specific instant in time, but again, that instant, that moment, is only one specific little instance of broader time, or like eternity, I guess you might say. So we see that like anything that we apprehend, that we look at, that we identify, is like it's a specific thing, and yet it is at the same time uh, derived from universals as well. And then that leads us into kind of the way that whenever we're looking at any specific object, we see that again we're looking at a single thing, and yet that single thing is comprised of many other different things. Again, universals. Like the one is comprised of the many. So we see this kind of seemingly contradictory nature of, well, things. Like look at the book here, right? Like this book, it is a book. That is, it is one thing to me, and yet it is at the same time many things, because there are many qualities which this book possesses which make up the book. That is, it is a certain color, it is a certain shape, it is a certain weight, etc. So like we're looking at one thing, and yet at the same time we have to recognize that this one thing is made up of many things. Again, there's the thesis, the antithesis, and then we achieve a higher level of consciousness by reconciling the opposites into a synthesis, right? That is, of course, the famous, or again infamous, Hegelian dialectic of generally explained as being thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. But anyway, so again, consciousness progresses by recognizing the the contradictions in whatever it is perceiving, and like absorbing those things, and like attaining to a higher level. And this doesn't just like pertain to like individual human consciousness. According to Hegel, this is like the nature of reality itself. It is like reality is comprised of contending forces, or contending ideas, perhaps. Again, this is all idealism, specifically German idealism. But I wrote down here, echoing Heraclitus, Hegel holds that the world consists of opposing, contradictory forces. Moreover, everything that exists contains its own opposite within it, for whatever is implicitly defines what is not. That is to say, black contains white within it, because white is the opposite of black. Again, you kind of have to think outside the box a little bit to grasp that like everything, by being defined as a certain thing, also contains the opposite of that thing within it, simply by being, simply by existing. It's like yin yang, right? The white defines the black, and the black defines the white. But I want to refer again to my note here where I said echoing Heraclitus, because this is, I've reviewed the fragments of Heraclitus previously, and a lot of the metaphysics here can definitely be traced back to Heraclitus. The epistemology can be traced to Kant. But the metaphysics can be traced all the way back to Heraclitus, and Hegel views the world as Heraclitus did, as being this thing that is constantly in flux, that is constantly positing certain things, and then those certain things are being negated by the opposite of those things, and that consciousness progresses through the realization of this process. Now that I've kind of explained as best I can what Hegel's position on how consciousness develops, we move into kind of the applications of that. So according to Hegel, human consciousness cannot achieve freedom except in relation to other human consciousnesses. And this is where we come to the the notable section of this book, which concerns the Lord bondsman dialectic. So when two people confront each other, according to Hegel, they engage in effectively a battle of wills, which needs must result in one becoming lord and the other becoming bondsman, because each consciousness is trying to assert itself over the other. And like one has to give, like one has to be alpha, one has to be beta, right? So we see again this kind of like the again we see that the essence of things is like conflict, in a sense, right? However, the dialectic progresses so that the bondsman, however, ultimately ends by realizing himself more fully than does the Lord, because as they say, it's lonely at the top. The Lord wants recognition, like this consciousness wants recognition. But the fact that it has subjugated the other consciousness to it means that it has no equal now in which it can basically see itself reflected as it is. It only has like a slave now. And so, like I say, it's lonely at the top. In other words, the Lord finds himself kind of isolated because he is the pinnacle. All others, the bondsman is beneath him. But the bondsman ends up realizing himself, as I wrote, more fully than does the Lord, ironically, because the bondsman, in doing like work and toil, is able to like put themselves into the world and sees their personality like reflected back at them in the things that they do or something. And so the servant ends up being, in a way, more free than the master, I guess you might say. Yeah, so, and then moving on from that claim that human consciousness cannot really achieve like real freedom, real like acknowledgement, except in relation to other consciousnesses. Uh, the individual, therefore, according to Hegel again, can only find true self-actualization within a community. This I underline because this is very important, very damning as well. Only nations matter, not individuals. So, for Hegel, the real the real generative force in of humanity is not the individual person, but rather the state, the nation, right? In essence, the particular cannot be understood when separated from the whole. Like for Hegel, the individual is effectively meaningless apart from a broader community. And of course, Hegel actually says this not in this book, but in another book of his, which I believe is the Elements of the Philosophy of Right. He literally says all the worth which a person possesses, they possess only through the state. Moreover, Hegel says also that the state is the divine idea as it exists here on earth. That is, that is, the state is effectively, it is like, it is something, it is literally divine. It is an emanation of God, because we have to remember that, according to Hegel again, the development of the world, the development of spirit does not just denote the development of human spirit, it denotes the development of the world spirit, the absolute. So humans individually have no real meaning and they have no real fulfillment in and of themselves. This only happens when they come together in a group. Again, it is collectivism. And that the state, or like the various states, the various nations of the world, are like the real generative elements of humanity. This is the way that the absolute, i.e., God, realizes itself, is through not just interpersonal conflict, but international conflict as well. So going on from there, spirit is manifest in the customs and government of a people. As such, social institutions are effectively like self-justifying. Um, what I mean is, this is where we get into like the rather negative effects that Hegel has had, which I will touch on more later. But one of the things about Hegel's conception of the world as this like thing that's always in flux, of opposites being contrasted with their opposites, like things being contrasted with their opposites, theses being contrasted with their antitheses, is that there really is no absolute. And well, there is an absolute, that is the world spirit, the absolute spirit, but there is no absolute as regards truth. Rather, it's all true. And that's the thing, is that it's all, again, each there is no, you can't say that like one nation or one people is necessarily like more correct than another, because it's all just God, right? It's all the absolute. It's all the world spirit realizing itself. It's all contained within the absolute. So these very like different cultures and everything, different ways of living, different customs and such, they're all like self-justifying so long as they prevail. And that again, we're going to get into why this whole thing is very, very dangerous, and has manifestly proven itself to be very dangerous, because it's effectively just the naturalistic fallacy on the grandest of scales. That's effectively what it is, because all is truth. uh, Nothing can really be said to be the correct, like the truth. Because all is truth, nothing can really be said to be the truth. To quote like Syndrome, right? When everyone's super, no one will be. It's kind of like that. But going on from there, Hegel then goes into this extended section. Uh, oh, well, before I move on, actually, Hegel says that war is sometimes a necessity to regulate the interests of the constituent elements of the social whole. That is, because what counts as regards humanity is not the individual person, but only the state. The state is therefore justified sometimes in conducting war, to, again, mitigate the constituent elements, to provide space, living space, and like equalize fortunes and such like that. Again, I hope that you can start to see um, some of the rather potentially, or not potentially, actually detrimental elements to this way of thinking. But okay, now moving on from there, Hegel goes into this extended section about the kind of divine feminine versus masculine. And this is where we really start getting into like mysticism. Uh, this is where it really starts losing any kind of like actual connection with reality, where it's really just him positing a bunch of bullshit, basically, as fact. But according to Hegel, there is a conflict in like human society between the family and the state. According to Hegel, woman is the unconscious divine law, that this is embodied in the female, and that man represents the conscious human law, which is the state. Because of course, in Hegel's day, women had no, like, very few legal rights. Like, uh, I mean, women didn't have like careers, right? They were, housewives, keepers of the hearth and home. Right. And so for Hegel, woman therefore represents family, the kind of divine, whereas man represents like the state and government, because men go out and like, or at that time, went out and like did things, had careers, and also had careers in like the civil service. Again, the state, like the command of society was entrusted to men at that time exclusively, pretty much. And so, yeah, we have a kind of dichotomy between, and a kind of friction as well between female and male, feminine and masculine. And I would love to know what Hegel would make of like today's world, where that doesn't really hold true necessarily anymore. But I digress. So we get that long, and this thing gets increasingly more mystical and like esoteric as it goes along. Like it starts out in the early pages, you can you can grasp what he's saying about, like, again, the different ways of viewing things between particulars and universals. Like that's actually has some kind of grounding in like real philosophy. But as this thing goes along, it gets progressively more outlandish. It gets progressively more, again, like arcane, actually. And so then after that point, the rest of the book is generally kind of given over to discussions about morality, and like long and very, very, very difficult to understand discussions on ethics. And then after that, we have the section on religion, in which Hegel gives us, again, it's opinion masquerading as fact. He gives us his take on like how different religious beliefs reflect different stages of consciousness. How in like primitive religions you have like light as like, like the sun god, that kind of thing, and then eventually you have like Christianity, which, again, I want to point out that Hegel's degree was effectively a theology degree. And as the quote by Stephen Hicks explained, what Hegel was really doing is like reformulating Christian theology into a more intellectually respectable guise. And so his discussion on religion is, again, it's damn near impenetrable, but essentially that like the incarnation as represented by Christ represents like the pinnacle of all religious experience, because it is like God coming back down into the world. It's like the world spirit recognizing itself and like giving divine, it's like imbuing the religious community with this divine spark, or who the hell knows, really. I don't know. That was it. And then we have the very last brief chapter about absolute knowing, and about how eventually like true, like absolute knowledge can be attained once history has reached its end and spirit has fully recognized itself and known itself. And yeah, that's the book. So that's the overview of Phenomenology of Spirit as far as I can give it. That's effectively the end of my notes, pretty much. I want to reiterate that this truly is like the ne plus ultra of bullshit. I've never read anything like this. And this, like, and let me just give you an example of what reading Phenomenology of Spirit is like. So, like, to read this book, like reading Phenomenology of Spirit, it's like, imagine 495 odd pages of a person saying, well, it's really white, but actually it's black. It's really long, but actually it's short. It's really hot, but actually it's really cold. It's really round, but actually it's square. Just imagine, again, hundreds of pages of that. And let me just give you like a passage out of here, because this is like, I think this will sum it up quite well, I think. So I'm just going to read this passage from the section entitled "The Truth of Enlightenment." The listless movement of spirit, which no longer creates a distinction within itself, has thus entered into its own self beyond consciousness, which, on the other hand, sees itself clearly. The first moment of this clarity is determined in its necessity and conditioned by the fact that pure insight, or insight that is implicitly notion, actualizes itself. It does so when it posits otherness or determinateness within itself. In this way, it is negative pure insight, i.e., a negation of the notion. This negation is equally pure, and thus there has come into being the pure thing, the absolute being that has no further determination whatever. Characterized more precisely, pure insight qua absolute notion is a distinguishing of differences which are no longer differences, of abstractions or pure notions which are no longer self-supporting, but are supported and distinguished only by the movement as a whole. This distinguishing of what contains no difference consists simply in the fact that the absolute notion makes itself into its object and posits itself as the essence over against that movement. This results in the essence being without that side wherein abstractions or differences are held apart, and therefore becomes pure thought in the form of a pure thing. This, then, is just the listless, unconscious movement to and fro within itself of spirit to which faith was reduced when it lost a content that contained a difference. It is at the same time that movement of pure self-consciousness for which the essence is supposed to be the absolute alien beyond. For because this pure self-consciousness moves about in pure notions, in differences that are not differences, it collapses in fact into the unconscious movement to and fro of spirit, i.e. into pure feeling or pure thinghood. The self-alienated notion, for the notion here is still standing at the stage of this alienation, does not, however, recognize this identical essence of the two sides, the movement of self-consciousness and of its absolute being, does not recognize their identical essence, which is, in fact, their substance and enduring being. Since the notion is unconscious of this unity, absolute being has value for it only in the form of a beyond standing over against it, while the consciousness making these distinctions and in this way having the in itself outside of it is held to be a finite consciousness. If that sounds like pure horseshit, that's because that absolutely is pure horseshit. And I want to also talk about not just the content of this book, but its form, its style as well. I also really want to talk about how this book is written and moreover why this book is written in the way that it is. But anyway, so that right there will give you a little teaser for what reading this whole mound of verbiage is like. Again, if that sounds like pure horseshit, that's because that is absolutely what that is. But the trick when reading this is to just try to snatch the fleeting little sporadic snippets of sense that on occasion pop out of this mound of crap. But anyway, so now that I've talked about the book and what the book says insofar as I was able to understand it, if there is indeed a correct way to understand this, because I would want to point out that Hegel himself said at the end of his life that only one person was able to understand his philosophy, and even that person did not understand his philosophy. So don't feel bad when you're reading this shit if you don't understand it. You're not really, it's not meant to be something that's like easily graspable, if indeed it can be said to be graspable at all. But anyway, so now that we've covered, now that I've explained the book insofar as I was able to grasp the book, I want to talk about the effects that this book has had, because this book, Phenomenology of Spirit, is one of the most devastating books ever written as regards its impact on the development of society, the course of human history. This book's influence has been nigh incalculably catastrophic. So we all probably are aware of how this influenced Marx and the development of his philosophy, because Marx, he didn't really adapt the content of Hegel's philosophy so much as he adapted its form. That is to say, Marx took Hegel's idealism and, as he said, set it on its feet, because according to Marx, Hegel was on to the right track. He had the right method, but what he ultimately arrived at was like the wrong thing. But he had the right method again. So Marx inverted the Hegel's dialectical philosophy so that it is no longer idealistic but materialism. Hence, dialectical materialism. But we know, of course, that influence, but also Hegel not only inadvertently gave us communism, he also gave us fascism, and he gave us fascism in a much more direct way. Giovanni Gentile, the Italian philosopher, who is pretty much the father of fascism, was a prime Hegelian, lived and breathed this crap. And of course, this is because of Hegel's collectivism, his statism. Like, I also have a note here where I wrote that ethics is only downstream from metaphysics. Before you formulate any notions of how people ought to behave as regards one another, first you have to have some conception of what the nature of man is, and moreover, the nature of the world that man exists in. And so, if the world operates according to a process of clashing contradictions, then so does humanity. And war and conflict are thus not only justified, but effectively glorified. And so, again, Giovanni Gentile, prime Hegelian, again, lived and breathed this crap and took the, like, Hegel's statism to its, like, extreme, its logical conclusion, and said, as Mussolini put it, nothing outside the state. Individuals do not matter. Persons don't matter. It's only people. And again, as Hegel said elsewhere, the state is the divine idea here on earth. So again, we see how Hegel is ultimately responsible for all this crap. But also, not only Italian fascism, but German National Socialism. In Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, which I want to point out that title means my struggle. There is a reason why that title is my struggle, because as with Hegel, Hitler was viewing the world as a place. It's like it's a battleground. It's a place of war, of battle. And Hitler himself was certainly no philosopher, but Hitler was only the product of philosophers such as Hegel. And in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, we also see the same kind of warped view of evolution that can be directly traced back to Hegel. Because again, if nature is teleological, and Hegel makes it very clear that nature, history, the world itself is teleological, because it's all just the absolute working itself out and coming to know itself. So everything is purposive. And in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, we see this same warped sense of evolution, where he says that, like, evolution is like, it's geared towards the production of, like, the Aryan, is effectively what he's saying, that evolution is evolution towards something. Again, you can trace that right back to this book, right back to Hegel, this kind of warped conception of nature. Nature is not teleological. The only purpose of any organism is to adapt to its environment. There is no, like, one specific organism that nature was, like, always working towards. That's not how evolution works. But again, this kind of warped conception of the process is directly attributable to Hegel. But not just communism, not just fascism. Oh no, Hegel is also effectively the father, I would say, of postmodernism. Kant is the grandfather, I would say, of postmodernism. But Hegel is postmodernism's true father. Like, Kant opened the breach, right? Because Kant said that we can never know reality, and that what we do know as reality, phenomenal reality, is a construction of our minds. That opened the breach. That separated man from the world. And it opened a breach, which a whole lot of bad things followed through. Kant unlocked the door, but Hegel tore the door off its hinges. And Hegel is effectively the father of postmodernism. Like, have you ever heard a lot of these postmodernists say things that say that things are social constructs, things such as race or gender, that these things are just social constructs, that they're not actual like facts of reality. They're just like ways of, they're just like ideas, right? They're just ways of viewing the world. That is directly attributable to this, because again, if everything is truth, then there is no one specific actual truth. And so that's why when you hear postmodernists say things like race and gender are just social constructs, when you hear people like Vosh say the most insane crap like ice is trans water, that's just an echo many years down the line from Hegel. Again, it's just ideas of the absolute that are working themselves out. And it is not that truth represents whatever actually corresponds to reality, because reality, we have to remember, according to Hegel, is mental itself. Rather, truth is whatever prevails. And again, if you can't see how catastrophic that idea, that notion has been through history, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, Hegel is one of the most influential philosophers. He is the most influential philosopher of modern times. To understand the modern world and how it works, you really have to understand Hegel. So again, I knew I was going to have to read this book eventually. Um, and it's not good. It's not good stuff, y'all. It is not good stuff at all. And as I said a little bit ago, I want to talk about not only what this book says, I want to talk about the way in which it says it. Because as you, I hope, have gleaned from the passage that I read from it, this is the most like impenetrable gibberish ever penned. In fact, let me. I have another quote here that I wrote down from Arthur Schopenhauer, Hegel's contemporary, who notoriously hated Hegel, and with just cause. Um, Schopenhauer said, Hegel, installed from above by the powers that be as the certified great philosopher, was a flat-headed, insipid, nauseating, illiterate charlatan who reached the pinnacle of audacity in scribbling together and dishing up the craziest, mystifying nonsense. This nonsense has been noisily proclaimed as immortal wisdom by mercenary followers and readily accepted as such by all fools, who thus joined into as perfect a chorus of admiration as had ever been heard before. The extensive field of spiritual influence with which Hegel was furnished by those in power has enabled him to achieve the intellectual corruption of a whole generation. That is unfortunately not true. Hegel did not intellectually corrupt just one generation. Hegel has intellectually corrupted many generations and continues to do so. But what Schopenhauer was referring to in that quote, if you don't know, by the powers that be, Hegel was designated the state philosopher by the Prussian government because in this, like, again, just inscrutable, tortured mass of gibberish is effectively justification for any kind of authoritarianism that you can imagine. As the fascists and the National Socialists actually demonstrated, this is justification for this is collectivism, this is statism, and it is, again, it has been inordinately detrimental to the course of history. But again, I want to talk specifically about the way that this book is written, because there is no flipping reason whatsoever that anything has to be written this way. And I want to just give a word of advice to people out there. And you can say, what do you know? You're just some random guy on YouTube. But here's my word of advice. Whenever you encounter anything that is written like this, it behooves you to be very cautious, very careful, very skeptical, because people generally do not speak or write like this unless they're trying to get something over on you. As they say, if you can't dazzle them with intelligence, you baffle them with bullshit. If you can't convince them, you confuse them. And that is exactly what Hegel did. I want to read one last quote that I wrote down here. This one from Bertrand Russell, which effectively summarizes my sentiments pretty succinctly. Hegel's philosophy is so odd that one would not have expected him to be able to get sane men to accept it, but he did. He set it out with so much obscurity that people thought it must be profound. It can quite easily be expounded lucidly in words of one syllable, but then its absurdity becomes obvious. That is my sentiments exactly as regards this book. There is no reason to write like this unless you're trying to foist upon people some pretty nefarious bullshit. Now, that's not to say that everything that is difficult to read and comprehend is necessarily bullshit. But when you encounter the kind of copious word salad that this is written in, that is a strong indication that this is that this is bullshit. And that is what this is. This is, in my opinion, Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit constitutes a doctrine of pretty much pure evil couched in blithering claptrap. That is how I would describe Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. It's not good stuff, y'all. It is not good stuff. Once more, the influence that this book has had on the course of human history has been nothing short of catastrophic, and it continues to be so, as I hope you will be able to perhaps see with my rambling, paltry little explanation here. But yes, Phenomenology of Spirit by Hegel. I read it. I understood, I think, as much as can be reasonably expected to be understood out of something that is effectively mostly bullshit. And the stuff that isn't bullshit, you really wish it was. It's not good stuff, y'all. It is not good stuff. Hegel is the worst philosopher of modern times. If we want to, if we want to judge by the fruits, then Hegel is absolutely the worst philosopher of modern times. His influence has been, again, pretty much near incalculably devastating. He gave us communism inadvertently. He gave us fascism advertently. And there are tens of millions of corpses that can be attributed to the bullshit scribblings of Hegel. So yes, Phenomenology of Spirit. I read it. Like I say, I understood as much of it as I think can be reasonably expected to be understood. It's not good stuff. It's crap. Nobody should buy into this at all. People buy into this, as Bertrand Russell pointed out in that quote, because like you're geared to think that anything this convoluted has to have some type of wisdom to it. This is not a healthy way of looking at the world at all. And I said that in my review of Heraclitus's Fragments. This is not a good way to look at the world. It is a very damaging, very harmful way of looking at things, and people buy into this because Hegel was given, again, by the Prussian government the ultimate platform, because they used this crap as an excuse for their statism. And subsequent generations of philosophers and armchair philosophers have bought into this hook, line, and sinker. But please don't. Like, that is I want to implore you out there, please don't buy into this, because this is, frankly, pretty much demonic. But anyway, yes, Phenomenology of Spirit. I'm glad to say that I've got this one under my belt. I consider this, once more, effectively a doctrine of pure evil couched in blithering claptrap. But I am glad I read it. Now, if you've read this book out there, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people out there that will say, well, you're just selling Hegel short. Who are you? You're just some guy on YouTube. You don't even have a philosophy degree. How dare you judge or criticize Hegel? I don't give a shit. This is, again, it's demonic bullshit, basically. But Again, let me know down in the comments what your thoughts on Hegel are. And if you haven't read this, I would never recommend this except to the most diehard of philosophical completionists, because this is one of the most. It may be like the most difficult thing. I mean, again, it's difficult because so much of it is bullshit. But um, if you are one of those completionists out there, you might want to consider picking this up, if only, as I said, because to understand the modern world, you really have to understand the ideologies that drive the modern world, and Hegel's is right at the forefront of things. So you might want to read this just to get a better grasp, perhaps a more revealed look at what drives the world. But I would never recommend this as anything of like genuine quality that should be, um, like treated as some kind of gospel. It's not. It is a gospel of pure destruction, and oppression. But anyway, yeah, if you're one of those out there, maybe pick this up. If not, just take it from me. It's horse shit, and don't trust it. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.